In pursuit of that question, Jennifer, what is the border, right? And I could phrase it differently. What is a border?
Yeah, the border, the southern border, Lois, it's a border. It's a border. I know it's a different country. It's a country I don't know. As a teenager, I crossed over with my cousins to get some cheap liquor, you know, but that's about it, you know. I know that my Nana, when my uncles were fighting in World War II, she made a pilgrimage on her knees to a church there in Mexico. But I know nothing about Mexico, you know. That border is the border between the United States and Mexico. These people may be related to me. You know, that's, you know, there could be a lot of relatives down there I don't know about. But a border, it's just, I don't know, to me, I see it as a restriction. You're being limited in some way. And a lot of times, you know, we create that ourselves. In terms of art, I know when like years ago when I was with Mars, we were limited, we were boxed in, we were bordered in by being brown-skinned people. This is how we presented our art group, and so we were limited to that. And you know, that's not always fun to be confined like that. Does that make sense?
That'll make a lot of sense. I think one of the observations I've had working on the exhibition with Jennifer and Lauren is that originally, at least for me, I thought of the exhibition as the border project, right? And as we get closer and closer to the exhibition opening, and as I think more and more about the works in it, I have to admit I'm wondering if it should have been named a border project. Because I'm thinking a lot about how boundaries, divides, and borders, and limitations are being represented and are being constructed in the works of art. And that's kind of the thought process behind the question. I wanted to see how you related or didn't to some of those thought processes.
Yeah, it's not a thing because people do ask me that a lot. It's like, I don't know if I can necessarily answer when they're asking me about these questions because I'm up here in Phoenix, and my family's been up here in Phoenix for a long, long time, you know, so I'm not affected the way that other people are affected, or, you know, because I can't really speak about Mexico. I don't know it, and, you know, so that limits me to here, but I don't feel like it's a limit. I feel like this is where I'm at. This is where I'm at, and I can talk about my experiences here and the way that the world has changed its attitude towards me because I didn't really experience that as a kid, you know, except for these weird things about the skin tone and stuff like that. My friends didn't even know that I was Mexican, of Mexican descent, and I grew up with people saying, asked me if I was Italian. And when I'd say Mexican, it's just like, oh, I'm so sorry, kind of, you know, look on their faces. But yeah, there's Polynesian. There was all these different things that people would ask me if I was, you know, it's like as if they wanted me to be something other than Mexican. So that's not a thing, but you know, too, it's like my point of view is a little weird when it comes to like when people say, oh, we want to see someone that looks like us on TV. Well, I grew up with black and white TV. Everybody had dark hair, dark eyes, you know, so it doesn't matter, you know. I didn't really need that. I didn't have any teachers that were brown. You learn where you learn. You have to be willing to see everybody's point of view in order to form one of your own. And you have to experience the world in order to be a person, it's like art has really helped that because I put things up on the wall and started getting reactions from people, and then I know, I could keep saying what I want to say, or I could, maybe I'd rather pull it back a little bit. So that's the art thing has really helped me in that sense.
So it seems like there's another aspect of your work that would be really helpful to talk about, and it's from some of the works that you showed us earlier, this idea of disorientation.
Right. Yeah, that was the series, The Only Spanish I Know. And it came from not being in this group in Mars, and where everybody, you know, just assumes that you know Spanish, you know how to be a brown person, and you know, I'm just trying to be the brown person that I am. But so because of that, and also other series came out of applying for art shows, and in 1 week, this one memorable week, I think it was in the 80s, I got rejections from 2 different places that said I'm not Chicano enough and too Chicano. So, with the same work. So, it's like, talk about confusion, you know, I'm just as confused as everybody else about what people want me to be, or, you know, so that's when I started going in my own directions, like making fun of who I am, or poking fun at that sort of thing. It's like, well, you want a Mexican here, you're going to get a Mexican. And, you know, so that's why I started making this work, you know, but using words, the only Spanish words that I grew up with, and mostly it was food. So, and then pairing them up with these images that I found in a surplus house. They were glass, beautiful glass negatives, 8x10 glass negatives that I was printing with, and I just thought it was just so appropriate to confuse people with an image and text that have nothing to do with each other, but if you don't know what the text means, you are confusing them. Or they're just, you know, they're going to have to come up with their own meaning. You know, they're going to have to decide this is what it means. And I like that. I like when people decide that, even if it's wrong. That's what they're bringing into it. And you know, anytime if you are, it's what you're bringing into it. That's what you're going to see. But that's where this series came from. It's all these just a few random words that I knew as a kid and said, you know. Yeah.
I think with the series, I said it before, but I think the portraits are really compelling.
They are.
And it is. It does. It's a twist. The combination of image and text.
Of course, it's been, I hear people go, Abodinga. That man's name is Abodinga. This one was always my favorite, because this is like one of those words that a lot of people know, even if you don't speak Spanish. So it's like, so that one, that one's always been my favorite. And that's why I did it as a kid. You know, it's one of those words that you know, you learn as a kid.
Portraiture comes up in your work
All the time.
right? What is a portrait?
It's an image of someone's their being. It doesn't have to be. Let me see behind me on the other side of the camera there. That's a family portrait of mine, and I just fell in love with it when I found it recently. I was going through a lot of photographs that I hadn't seen in a long, long time. It's blurry. It's out of focus. My mother was obviously taking it with the branding, went like this when she put the shutter. But from here, I can see 5 children. I can see the other 4 kids that I grew up with, and it's their image. It's not very clear, but that is a portrait. And to me, that's kind of like sums up my family. You know, it's blurry. You know, everybody goes through that. That's kind of like, you know, that's just the family portrait. It's blurry and it's, you know, confusing, but that's the way families are. So it's just kind of like, you know, it doesn't necessarily have to be that person, because I know that I was the stubborn one whenever I took an art class and they said do a self-portrait. I was the one that never, you know, everybody else would do it in the bathroom mirror, taking a picture of themselves. I never did that. I would like compose a self-portrait out of old family photographs, or take a picture of something that meant a lot to me. I was always the one that did that, you know, because it's not necessarily this is my portrait here. It's, you know, it's something else that's important to me, and you know, what I am at that time. So that's what I hope to get from other people, you know, other people's portraits. Because I have this one picture of my a cow that my tata had on his land, He used to like board animals for other people, and it's like that. So that to me was like a portrait of my Baba, finding this picture of a cow that lived on his land that he took care of.
So portraits can be familiar, and they can also come to represent something small.
Right.
But in the case of this particular series, there are people who don't even know.
Right. And that was the first time I dabbled in that, because before that I was always using family pictures. And but now I have learned to like find the beauty in just pictures. I have like in the past few years, I've just been rescuing pictures like you wouldn't believe it. You know, in thrift stores, in antique stores, at rummage sales, at estate sales. It's like, how dare they get rid of this? You know, it may be a baby or something. Oh, I have this beautiful picture that I found. It's a crying baby, but it's an 8x10 crying baby. So they took the time to make it large, because it probably would have been just a snapshot. But I love it. It's just like I keep finding these portraits of people that are just, I'm just compelled to save them, to bring them home so that they don't get thrown in the garbage or something, you know. And I've got quite a few. They may never make it in the artwork, but they may decorate a room for me someday. It's just, I like these people. There's just something about them that, you know, I was drawn to them by their image, by, you know, how they looked or what they were doing. And but lately it just seems like they start telling stories to me too. So I may eventually use them to illustrate something, because, you know, I get kind of crazy if we go somewhere. You know, if I find a pile of photos, I'm just there. And, you know, because I know years ago when I was doing a series about my grandmother, my dad's mom, she died when he was 2. But I look exactly like her. And when I was a teenager, I found a picture of her sitting in a field with a parasol behind her, and I'm going, is that me? I asked my mother, is that me? And she said, no, that's your grandmother. And it's like, that was just this big changer for me. It's like, oh my God, you know, there was this person that looked exactly like me that lived before me. I never got to meet her. And so I've done a lot of artwork about her. And because her life story was an awful lot like my life story. And I didn't know that until I got to know all these little things about her. There were quite a few things in our lives that kind of matched up. It was really weird. So, but she died very young. She died like when she was 20, or her early 20s, 21, 22, something like that. So, you know, so I go back to using those pictures, but these other people, I like to, they create stories for me too. I get it everywhere, all these photos.
When you're looking through stacks of photographs, how do you choose which ones you like, which ones you want to take home, and then how do you choose which ones you want to include in your work?
They all have to speak to me in some way. I guess where I was going with that thing with my grandmother was that when I was looking at her pictures, I was in there. It was like, you know, I could lose myself in there, and I'm just like living her life and looking around me and seeing the trees, and you know, and where she lived and how she lived, and you know, that sort of thing. And the people that I find in the, you know, being sold elsewhere, I immediately, you know, they'll tell me a story right off the bat. You know, in my head there's these stories all the time, and so it's just that simple sometimes when I see one, and I come up with a couple of words that can go underneath it. But you know, other times they may just be a really great picture, and I just want to keep it, and I don't want to share it with anybody. Because I have a lot of really old ones, and they're not going anywhere. It's just I wanted to have them, because to me it's like I'm protecting them from going any further. They don't need to go any further. And but you know, so they may not make it ever into an image, into a piece of artwork, but there are some that right away they tell me what they're going to do. You know, you just kind of have to create your own story.